right, greetings everybody, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today we have Mark Fiorentino with us, but before we get started, let's check on the day. It's May 30th, 2024. Welcome everybody to Conflict Radio. I see Davy Jones Locker is here, Top Taz is here, Nicole Morezzi is here, Dr. Strangelove is here, Sup and Stuff popped in. Let's see, I guess, well, that comment should probably go away. And let's see, Hank Stolk was in here earlier. So let's see here. I go to the comments. Let me get rid of that. Boom. Okay. How's everybody doing? Mark, did I say your name right? Fiorentino?
Mark Fiorentino. Very good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mark has written an awesome book called Master of Reality. He's going to tell us a little bit about that. He's been obsessed with Einstein's unified field theory ever since hearing about it when he was 10 years old. He worked for many years in the high-tech industry, including IBM, and I'm sure a few other places. We're going to delve into some interesting topics today. Mark, how are you doing? Welcome to Conflict Radio.
I'm doing well, Michael. It's good to be here.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about anti-gravity, and are you currently working on this?
Yes, I am. I'm doing a modeling math model as well as experiments dealing with anti-gravity detection. So yes, definitely working on it right now.
So are you working on it in a laboratory? Is it kind of like your garage? Is it for a company you work for? Or can you tell us a little bit about it?
I built a special room in my garage and sealed it. It's pretty much airtight, except for an air conditioner I have in there that brings the temperature down before I start my experiments, and all my equipment's in there that I bought, and I'm performing measurements to detect anti-gravity, and also detected a new force which I call linear gravity or gravity 2. As it turns out, this is generated at the same time the anti-gravity field is generated. And that makes sense because the anti-gravity field comes from dipoles. Dipoles being structures in nature that are created by either charge, electric charge, or magnetic charge. So a dipole really is nothing more than north pole, south pole, positive pole, negative pole. And it's from those structures that I've discovered that the anti-gravity field and gravity 2 fields emerge much weaker than the magnetic field or electrostatic field. And that's already well-known fact that gravity is many, many orders of magnitude weaker. So the signal is very faint, but it's detectable if you have a sensitive enough equipment and are very patient and careful.
All right. So is gravity what they tell us it is?
Well, what I've discovered in my first paper that's on ResearchGate, I basically determined that gravity 1, Newton's gravity, Einstein's gravity, is nothing more than a contraction of space. And that contraction of space, if you picture a single atom, a proton, let's say, and you look at it and you imagine it being a sphere, it's really 3 quarks are inside of it. And let's see here, I'll turn this on. They're moving in this pattern.
That's really cool.
That's what they're doing. They're doing that at 99% the speed of light in that tiny space. And what that does is that's what happens is we got a situation where that is rolling and spinning at the same time. So that becomes basically a tiny sphere that's rapidly rotating. And at the edges of that rotating sphere, there's a contraction all around it. So there's no pole. It's in all directions pointing inward, in all directions toward that atom. And all of them do this. And that's where mass comes from. It's the accelerated motion of unbalanced fundamental charges. When they move in that fashion, they cause a contraction of space. And Einstein discovered this model basically by reading work done by, what's his name? I can't remember his name right now. Ehrenfest, who got the idea from Max Born. And it comes from special relativity, that when you have accelerating objects like that, and moving in a circle is accelerating, by the way, you have a contraction of length, and that is what is causing the increase in mass too of the quarks. So my formulation predicts the mass of the proton and a neutron, and it gets it exactly right. And this all comes from the Ehrenfest paradox, which Einstein talks about. He was following the line of reasoning that began with the happiest thought of his life. Still at the Swiss Patent Office, he conducted one of his famous thought experiments, which he got from Ehrenfest, really. Einstein imagined a circle spinning in space. The center of the circle did not move, but its circumference was moving quickly in a circular direction. Einstein compared what happens in several reference frames, a standard tool he had used in developing the special relativity theory. He concluded, using his special relativity, that the boundary of the disk contracted as it spun. That's how particles, and that's what he was working on right up till his death, trying to come up with a scheme like that. I continued that. I extended his work and discovered the way to formulate that and achieve the mass of the proton and the neutron, and it can be applied as well to the electron. So that's gravity one, a contraction of space. Now, the new gravity that I'm talking about, that I'm seeing in the lab, is a linear gravity. In other words, it's being emitted from the north pole of a magnet, or the North Pole. And from the South Pole is anti-gravity. And if you look at the lines of force on the internet for a magnet, you'll see the lines of force actually coming out of the North Pole, which does not match my theory. In order for this to be working, the lines of force need to be going inward. And when I discovered this months ago, I said, well, something's wrong here, because according to what I'm seeing, the lines of force must be coming in the North Pole and going out the South Pole. So what I did is took a break from experiments and I did research, because I suspected that our good buddies, the physicists, got it wrong. So I went all the way back over 150 years to find out how the lines of force were determined initially. And it comes from Ben Franklin. He was one of the first to capture charges and detect electricity. And he guessed that the current was moving from the positive pole to the negative pole. He guessed wrong. And for the next 150 years, all of the scientists, Maxwell, Ampere, Volta, you name them, all the guys, Faraday, they all came up with the right-hand rule and lines of force coming from moving charges that were all going in the wrong direction. So they got it wrong. So in fact, what I believe is actually true, and what physicists will stubbornly confirm, is that if you really consider which direction the current flow is, all the lines are in the wrong direction. They admit it. And so now my theory makes sense. In fact, the lines of force are coming in, which means there's a contraction into the North Pole of a magnet, or into the positive pole of
I'm sorry about that.
Here we get some coming in there. And so it's been confirmed in my mind, and so I can continue my research, because there was a mistake made, which makes a big difference in my theory. So that's the other type of gravity. It's a linear type. It comes in out of one pole. It's emitted from the pole. It's attractive and goes through the magnet all the way through the lines of force, or space itself is being pulled in, tugged all the way down, and pushed out the other side of the magnet. And that's what gives it thrust. That's the slip wave. That's what causes photon particles to move. All particles, in fact, are caused by a dipole structure. So that's it in, as brief a nutshell as I can give it. There's two types of gravity and one anti-gravity. So now the unified field theory needs to be extended to include this new type of gravity and anti-gravity, which is what I'm working on right now. My next two papers will fully describe the electrogravitic model and the magnetogravitic model. This is essential to complete the unified field theory.
Okay. Will you feel that other gravity if you're on a pole?
You will if the field is strong enough.
You know what I mean, right? Like, would that affect anything that was there, or if you were there?
I'm not quite getting what you. If I were on the pole,
yeah,
of a magnet,
yeah.
Well, yes, you could feel it, but you have to realize to get the full effect of the anti-gravity effect in a useful form, it takes a large current, thousands of amps or more. So I don't have that capability at my house. I can't generate that. I can only, generate a small magnetic field. So what I have to do is weigh the magnet itself. And when I activate the current, the magnet becomes lighter. There's no theory that predicts that should happen except for my theory. And you have to do special things to isolate the magnet from the scale. It has to be elevated away from the scale. It can't be near any other metal or magnets or so forth, which I've done all of that. I've ripped this experiment apart at least 3 times, torn it all down, rebuilt it again, and tried again. And every time it happens. The next step really is when I describe this experiment in detail, giving all the information necessary for people to duplicate it, then we will see what happens.
So how long do you think before that happens?
Well, I'm making
What's your
hundreds of measurements. I can only measure maybe 2 hours a day because the magnet overheats and I don't want to damage it. I've already damaged one. And once you damage it, it gets shorts inside of it, and then it affects all the readings and measurements. And so I've already had that problem once. So can only do so many a day. I'm doing it at different voltage ranges, different current ranges. And so I'll be able to plot things out.
I do want to throw out there that doing anti-gravity research can be particularly dangerous, can it not? We've had
yeah, sure.
I mean, I live in Huntsville, Alabama, and here at UAH we've had 2 anti-gravity researchers that have, I mean, one went missing, presumably died, one, either took off to China, went to California, or died here in Huntsville. Another one was run over by a car, and pretty much taken out in the parking lot here at UAH. I mean, we've had let me throw. I mean, you've heard of these 2 scientists, Ning Li and Amy Eskridge, right?
Yeah, especially Ning Li. Yes.
All right, let me play this quick video if you don't mind by Amy, and let me throw this up just so everybody can see it. It's not that long; it's less than 2 minutes.
I'm in Huntsville, Alabama. I know I've said that several times. We're the Rocket City. We're the biggest steel you've never heard of. Von Braun was here and we won the space race. We developed the Saturn V here. We built the Saturn V here. We won the space race here in Alabama, whether you've heard of it or not. And I can tell you for a fact, so many prototypes. Only prototype built like this in the world. You turn it on the first time, it works exactly like you thought it would the first time. Great data. You apply for more funding to test it more thoroughly, they cancel it. They cancel it. It goes to NASA divestment. It goes to the auction block. People bid on it. And literally scrap metal vendors win the bid and melt it down for scrap metal and sell it. We could be crazy, crazy, crazy far. We could be on the moons of Jupiter. We could be exploring Pluto that isn't even a planet anymore if we had spent money differently. I can tell you the names of so many NASA scientists that are depressed and they want to kill themselves because they have built prototype after prototype after prototype in Huntsville, Alabama. First in the world, never before seen, worked the first time you turned it on exactly like you thought. And it was canceled and melted down for scrap metal. It's crazy.
Well,
All right. So there you go. And she's dead.
Yeah, that's awfully coincidental, I have to admit.
I mean, you must be concerned.
Yeah, and I'll say it right here to the United States Air Force. If you're listening, if you want me to stop, just come by, send a couple of their officers and we'll have the chat. And if it's against the rules, I'll have to stop. It's better that than winding up like these other people. They play rough.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be doing this. And they know they're committing crimes, but they do it anyway because they're basically above the law. And I don't know whether this girl was accidentally killed or on purpose. There would have to be an investigation, and that never seems to happen in these cases. It's just said to be an accident and so forth, and maybe it was, but it's mighty suspicious. And this kind of thing just sort of keeps happening. So if the Air Force is listening and you want me to stop talking about this, just come by and let me know, and I'll have to shut it down.
You're not depressed and disappointed in your life at all, right? You're
feeling
good, and
I'm really happy right now.
Okay. I just want to throw that out there, right? Like,
yeah, I'm enjoying this research. It's so interesting and so exciting to be on the cutting edge of something that could have a great benefit for this world. And that's what these scientists are really trying to do, is bring this forward. And someday it will, and I'm hoping soon. But when I hear and see things like this, what you just brought up, sure, I'm very concerned about it because they play rough. And so I will continue to say I'm a reasonable man. If you don't want me to continue working in this area, then I'll stop. I think they leave me alone because I'm not really an official physicist, and they probably say, well, who's going to believe him anyway? But
well, I mean, video evidence speaks for itself, right? But then again, I mean, with AI nowadays, they can always say anything's faked.
Right. That's true. But I feel that I have, and I feel this very deeply, and I actually know it. It's more than a feeling, that I was really sent to do this type of work and to reveal this. This world needs it. Even the bad guys who think they need to cover this up. Everybody benefits if this comes out and we start building hovercraft and interstellar spacecraft, because this technology not only can cancel out gravity and what these other people would have discovered if they had gone further or they had more of a correct theory, which most of them don't, not even Ning Li. She was on the verge of getting a better understanding because she knew it was based on the electrostatic fields and so forth. But what really needs to happen is a great awareness and an increase in the consciousness of all the world. And this technology will bring that about, because we'll be able to go to other worlds. And
Do you think that the ability to do this technology has anything to do at all with our magnetic field that surrounds the planet?
no,
So that,
they-
what I'm saying is that if the magnetic field is shrinking and disappearing like it is it going to be able to, is that going to affect the anti-gravity devices that are possibly being used today?
no,
Okay.
because, well, there's two ways to create anti-gravity, and everybody pretty much knows this. This is not secret, but I'll just come right out and say it bluntly and honestly. Electrogravitic, which uses a capacitor type of technology to create an extreme voltage. So that's one way to create an anti-gravity field. And the other way is high magnetics, which needs high current. One way or the other, and you can make an anti-gravity field. But it takes a lot of power, a lot of energy. I'm not just talking 10, 20, 30, 40 volts. I'm talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of volts, and hundreds of thousands of amps if you're going to do the magnetic version. Not easy to do. I'm sure the United States is using and working on the electrogravitic model. Ning Li was working on a spin-off with superconductors. So superconductor technology, anybody who comes up with room temperature superconducting wire, that'll be classified because that's used to make the magnets that can handle the current needed to make an anti-gravity device. So I've studied that a little bit, and sure enough, that technology is being swept under the rug as well, along with all anti-gravity.
Do you think? Sorry,
I don't know why they keep wanting to keep this quiet. I don't know what the
money.
Well, money is one thing, certainly, but power, strategic military advantage. There's a lot of different reasons I could come up with.
Yeah, that's probably it there.
Well, initially, I'm sure it was because.
Do you think they already have this technology and they're suppressing it?
Yes, I'm absolutely sure of it. I have an eyewitness that came forward who has remained anonymous, who's had an up close contact with an experimental UFO in the desert. And that person said they were close enough to touch it and they saw the markings on it. And the markings said U.S. Air Force experimental. And that thing had no wings. It had no engines. It had no propellers. Yet it flew off at a high rate of speed and up into the sky. We have this technology. Don't know whether we could believe Bob Lazar or not, but he describes it well enough that he at least was talking to somebody that knows about this, probably coming through John Lear or something of that nature, who had his father had access to the advanced technology.
Do you think it's off-world technology, or do you think that it's just our technology that they're just keeping from us?
No, I think they reversed engineered and figured out, well, it's using high voltage or it's using high magnetics. In the old days, the high magnetics was, I think, explored first, and the Air Force had connections to every high magnetics lab in the United States. And they used to have their flyer and everything right on the page. Why were they so interested in high magnetics? Because of UFOs. Even in the first book that was written by Jessup, he mentions it in the forefront of the book. And if you look for that book that he wrote, that first book about UFOs, you'll find that introductory part has been stripped out. And you have to look really hard to find it. And when you do, there's one word that's redacted, and where they're talking about how the U.S. Air Force is not really interested in this new technology. And it starts with the letter M, and the rest of the word is blanked out, technology, which, you know, you're left to use your imagination. It starts with M, that's magnetics. So it's a long history. And do we have this technology? I'm sure we do. And we need to really accept that. You know, a lot of these shows are talking about, do we have it? Asking, of course we do. Let's move on from that.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's just get over that. Of course we do. What are they covering up? They're covering up something they know about, and they have.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to go through all this cover up nonsense just because, you know, we're being visited from another planet or whatever.
What's amazing to me on the side is that we're still building rockets that are incredibly expensive to build and putting satellites into space. We used the basic UFO technology I'm describing. We could, pennies to the dollar, we could lift up into space and put into orbit, I mean, for pennies, versus $20 million to put up a satellite or whatever it costs now, 20, 30, 40, 50 million. So easily, without all the rockets, without all of the effort to get out of it, we could just float it up, put it into the right orbit, and release it. And it would cost next to nothing to do.
Yeah.
Of course, that puts the rocket guys out of business. And
let me just take a minute to address everybody in the chat room. If you could give the video a thumbs up. I know that there's breaking news before we came on the show today. Let's just try to avoid talking about that kind of stuff in the chat room. You know, I mean, we're going to hear a lot about this verdict over the next few days. I'm sure, Mark, I'm sure you know about it. We're gonna hear plenty of it. I mean, we're just gonna be sick and tired of it. You know, by this time next week. So let's just take a break. Let's talk about what we're here to talk about. You know, thumb up the video so we get people to know that we are live, and then come in here. If you have any questions for Mark,
is not living.
What's that noise coming from?
Plus,
I get rid of it.
Oh, sorry. If you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat box, and we will get Mark answering questions here in just a little bit. I'll highlight it. I already have one highlighted from Dr. Strangelove, and we will get the questions here in just another 32 minutes. And
Yes.
And I know that everybody is frustrated. I know that some people are really excited. I know that there's, you know, a lot of venting people want to do. This isn't the place for that. Let's try to keep the comments clean. Let's be respectful of the guests, and we'll continue on with the show. Sorry about that, Mark. You do have a presentation for us, right?
It's not really ready yet. I could bring it up and just have a look at it. I don't know how to, let's see, we could share on this thing, hopefully.
Yeah, I think, here, let me click on you're allowed to share, right? There's a button there that says present.
Okay. Hold on. Slides. Oh, share the screen. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, share the screen. Chrome tab, window, entire screen. All right. Screen number 1.
All right, there we go. And then I'll add it. And let me make that big. There you go. All right, guys.
Well, this is a work in progress. So basically, these are all.
You want to hit that hit that maximize button on your tab there. Make it bigger on there. There you go.
these are all the things that I talk about. And this is, I don't know if you want to go through all of this right now or not.
Whatever you want to get into, I suppose. I'll tell you, you got 30 minutes.
All right. Well, it'd probably take a little longer than that. But basically, we got the discovery, the cause of particle motion, which I call the slip wave. And this is the model that I believe our buddies from other worlds have used to create faster than light space travel. You have to emulate the particles and how they move, because they do it more efficiently and more rapidly than anything else. A photon moves at an enormous rate of speed, 186,000 miles per second. That's not slow. And so I decided to study that in order to learn about gravity and anti-gravity, really. I suspected that if I could figure out how particles move, then I could figure out how to build a warp drive. And so the rest of this all the way down is about talking about that. So what we have here, what this means, the slip wave, basically, we should agree on this common knowledge. UFOs that we have reverse engineered work using one of two thrusting technologies, electrogravitic and magnetogravitic. I mean, you would agree with that, right? I guess. Are you there?
Yeah. Sorry, I had it muted to.
Yeah. All right. Therefore, gravity emitters that we have developed must use this two known fields of force, which are electrostatic field and magnetic field, to generate anti-gravity field using the foundational EM thrust mechanism, the dipole, which I talked about earlier. Gravity and anti-gravity fields are not caused by quantum fields, but have the same cause as general relativity describes for gravity. General relativity describes gravity as a consequence of the curvature of space-time. So that's why I talk about the ether. The ether and space-time are the same thing. Space-time is described as a dynamic, flexible medium that responds to the presence of matter and energy by bending and warping the fundamental field. The fundamental field is what they called the ether back before the year 1905, which is a quasi-elastic solid. That's the medium. The implications and significance of the discovery of slip wave and the cause of particle motion. Discovering the cause of particle motion will lead to the development of a spatial bias drive. This is the warp drive engine. The slip wave is a foundational concept that can be used for inertia-free, faster than light space travel. Knowledge concerning the cause of the particle motion is necessary for solving the unified field theory. When I thought of it, I went searching for proof of that. I says, surely Einstein must have thought of this as well, and looked for it. And I did find evidence in his two research papers. Albert Einstein sought to understand the cause of particle motion. In both of his unified field theory papers of 1925 and 1930, he acknowledged his inability to identify the cause of motion. In the concluding sentences of these papers, he stated, "Nevertheless, I'm still far away from asserting the physical validity of the equations I derived. The reason for this is that I have not yet succeeded in deriving equations of particle motions." I have done that. I have those equations. I have the complete set, and it will be demonstrated later on when I complete my PowerPoint.
All right.
So what I've discovered in my experiments is there is a thing called linear gravity, or gravity 2, and linear anti-gravity. And as you can see here, as a picture of a magnetic field, I've corrected the direction for the lines of force. See how they're going in here and coming out of the south? That's the corrected version. That's not what you'll see on the internet. It'll be reversed. But those lines are wrong. So since we have the lines, it's really space is being pulled in this direction through within to the center of the magnet, at which point it goes from being pulled toward the center, pushed away from the center. So that dipole structure, we have to invoke Newton's third law, which for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So what happens is, since the most intense field that's going through the center of the magnet is moving in that direction, the dipole structure moves this way, opposite. And that's what we see in nature. This makes sense. This is the only explanation ever provided by anybody in physics. Nobody else has ever attempted or succeeded in discovering the cause of particle motion. I've just described it for you. This is the actual mechanics behind the cause of how particles move. So that if you increase the magnetic field strength by increasing the current to the electromagnet, eventually this movement will become noticeable and measurable until the point whereas it will become, if you turn the magnet toward the north or upwards, it will float in space. And maybe this is what that young lady was talking about that we saw earlier. When they turned the thing on, it behaved exactly like it thought they thought it should. So this is what I'm talking about. We're really on the same ball field, and we're all standing around home plate at this point.
How do you think that the human condition would handle these G forces?
Well, the beauty of this is space is being stretched when this slip wave field emerges from either the magnet or the capacitive electrostatic field. And in so doing, all inertia, when you're inside of the slip wave, is canceled. Gravity 1 has no effect on you. You're in your own realm. And so as you're moving, let's say you're in a flying saucer and you're moving at 10,000 miles an hour, and then you want to make a right turn and go up. Unless you're looking out the window, you would not be aware of it. You would not feel any G forces at all. You can't do that in a jet because the jets and the rockets don't have a field that's canceling the effect of the mass and of your ship and of you. And so when it changes speeds and directions, you feel that inertia. You feel that resistance to the change in motion.
All right.
And
So it's kind of like the circle around your magnet there. If you're inside, that circle, then
right.
You're not affected. You know, the gravity is normal inside that circle. It's just the outside the circle that's affected.
Well, the beauty of the thing is, if you turn the North Pole upwards, so it's facing toward the stars up in the sky, and the South Pole downwards, it's going to hover, right? Because it's pushing away from the Earth's surface and being pulled actually on the other side. So there is a gravity-like field. If you put these magnets like under the floor of the UFO, or most commonly a large capacitor array, the slip wave field spreads out over and encompasses the whole ship, above and below it, in a heart shape, a cardioid shape. So you have on the north end the heart, and the I don't know if you can see me right now.
Yeah.
So it's going around, pointing down. That's pulling up, and then goes all the way around, pushing out. That's pushing up. So the South Pole chases the North Pole, just like Thomas Townsend Brown discovered. It's the same thing, only it's the magnetic version, which I'm working on now. It's the same exact thing.
You know, this makes a lot of sense. You know, you talk about warp drive. You know, it's like when the Enterprise on Star Trek is going warp speed, everybody in the ship is an experience. You know, they're not like pushed up against the back of the wall. It's not like on Spaceballs where they hit the brakes, and they all fly forward, and he's screaming that they didn't slow down first.
Right.
I always thought was funny as hell.
You're in your own realm. You're not moving, as long as you're not moving relative to the ship and you are at the same speed. That's the only thing that really matters. That's the frame of reference that really matters. And you're separated from the inertial effects interacting with space, all the mass and all the particles in you and in your ship. The Lorentz transformations are canceled. There is no contraction of length. If you were moving at 99% the speed of light, your ship would be flattened. I know physicists would argue with that, but you know what? That's what the equations say would happen. And your increase in mass would be tremendous, like beyond anything that you can measure. And that makes light speed travel impractical using rockets, using ion propulsion, using any other method you want. You have to use this one. This is the only one that works, unless you go to such an advanced technology where you're actually ripping space open and flying through dimensions and portals. That's a whole nother technology that's well beyond this discussion. I'm talking about the entry level system that emerging societies use when they're going to travel to interstellar space. This is the model. This is the only one. It's the only one that can work. And it's what we're trying to discover. And unfortunately, I don't know what you want to call it, our underground secret government, whatever, is suppressing this knowledge. And I'm praying and hoping that they'll allow me to continue without harming me or my family or anyone else, because we will all benefit, including the dark side and their families, because we need this technology, because there's certain things that I already know about that maybe the government knows about is also suppressing, and that is the Earth's core is unstable. And we could suffer tremendous damage at any time via volcanoes.
Well, the magnetic field is totally collapsing.
That's a symptom of a much bigger problem in the core of the Earth. And what we have.
This has happened before. It's a 16,000 year cycle or something. I mean, the Earth is going to flip. It's what it does. Either the crust is going to shift, or the Earth is just going to flip, and it's going to snap like a rubber band, and it's really going to be bad.
Well, what I'm saying to the Air Force, the Illuminati, whoever these guys are that are doing all this stuff, the men in black, whatever, I'm saying we all need this technology to be safe, because we need to bilocate. And the sooner we, as a planet, we start working on that, the better. Because if this planet may become uninhabitable, and everybody is going to perish, not just the people who are not elite. The elites can't survive on this planet if the atmosphere blows off, or it becomes too hot, or any number of things can go wrong. We need a backup location that people can go to just in case. And we need to make treaties with other planets so we can have setups and so forth, other civilizations, other ports. I'm sure that aliens have backup ports that they have underground here. We need to do the same thing. We are all at risk until this is done. This work is essential to the survival of the people of this planet. It must be allowed to come forward. I'm begging you guys to let this come forward. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, it's it's all about them, right? As long as they survive.
Yeah, well, it won't be a very good place if only a select few survive, and politicians or whatever, because they can't build, they'll die out. You need the workers. You need people that know how to do plumbing, electricians, you need carpenters, you need all of that stuff, all the engineers, everybody working together to survive. Or else we wind up just like all the other civilizations that came before us.
Well, I mean, it is possible that before the last pole shift, a civilization, a bit of a civilization did survive, and that's the problem that we're dealing with today. It's
We're
those.
dealing with more than likely a master reset of the whole human race, and with a great loss of life. And
Yeah,
I'm
and they're hoping to survive it so they could be the rulers of the next reset.
Well, then what survives mainly is a corruptive group.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Which will exterminate themselves eventually.
Okay, Manny has a question here, which is about this. So I'm just going to ask: would the size of the ship matter?
What's more important is the shape of the ship. You must be able to easily fit within the slipwave field. Now you'll notice a lot of the motherships are cigar shaped. That's perfect. I can see why they use that shape, or the Great Triangle. Simple geometries are what's necessary to travel beyond the speed of light. Anything poking out will then be subject to the Lorentz transformations and create a black hole. So what I'm saying is, if you bring the ship up, and keep in mind, within the slip wave, warp 8, warp 9, that's laughable. 8 times the speed of light is not good enough. 9, 10 times, it'll take years to even get to the nearest star. What we need is 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 times the speed of light. That's what we need in order to get across the galaxy, or to even get to other galaxies. You got to go around 50 to 100,000 times the speed of light. And that's possible with this technology. And it's all governed by one simple equation discovered by James Clerk Maxwell. That equation is C, the speed of light is equal to 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. If you master space by lowering those two numbers, permittivity and permeability, you have mastered reality, because you can go any speed you want. If those numbers, permittivity and permeability of space, were to drop to 0, you could go infinitely fast. That's what the equation says, and that's what experimenters have found in metamaterials, where they adjust the permittivity and permeability within the metamaterial. And they are claiming that light shining through this material goes infinitely fast. I don't want to get into the whole, it's group velocity versus, yeah, well, we can argue that left and right, but that makes sense to Maxwell's equations. And that's what happens when we use the slip wave. We drop permittivity and permeability of space because we're pulling it apart with this waveform.
Would the Starship Enterprise be the right shape?
No, that'd be horrible.
Okay. What about the saucer section?
The saucer section would work. Yeah, simple geometric form, no protruding things. It would be incredibly complex to build that, and if any part of it. Realize this is dangerous traveling beyond the speed of light, and I'll tell you why. Let's imagine you're going 1,000 times the speed of light and you lose the warp field. It's suddenly, let's say you're using the magnetic type and one of the coils burns out and the field drops, but you're still moving at 1,000 times the speed of light. There is no calling Scotty and saying, hey, we need to, because it's already over. As soon as that field drops and you're moving at 1,000 times the speed of light, your ship is flattened to infinitesimally small flat surface with an incredible amount of mass. Everything is jerked to a point. You'll feel the inertia suddenly, which will crush everything. and you will slow down to just below the speed of light with like a flat pancake moving through outer space.
So it'd be
You
like
can-
it'd be like that Titanic sub
Yeah,
on
implosion.
steroids.
Yeah, implosion, much more severe than that and much quicker. And there would be no time for anything. That's why when you're building these things, you have to have redundant circuitry. And if something's failing, you have to send the signals to slow the ship down before the field drops. Otherwise, it's over.
Do you think that Gene Roddenberry had some insight into this?
Not a whole lot. I mean, when people looked for explanation of the warp drive, there was nothing there. I mean, the basic concept was there, basically going faster than the speed of light, and you were using matter and antimatter, which it's true, you would need a lot of energy. But what mechanism was being used was never discussed that I know of. What I'm telling you now today, what nobody else can tell you, is exactly how it's done. The fields that are needed to be used and how to use them and how to safely use them. Now, for the Air Force folks again, keep in mind, if I solved this incredibly difficult problem, there's other problems I can solve. So maybe you should keep that in mind before dispatching anybody else.
They hired Ming Lee too, so I don't know.
I
don't know if you want to get a job.
Well, I would like to get a job, but not to build stuff that's going to wind up in a crusher. I could help build warp fields, warp drive, and I know the pitfalls better.
Why isn't Musk talking about this or looking at any of this?
Because he builds rockets. You know,
but I mean, wouldn't he want to be on the front line of this technology?
Well, he's a visionary, and one would think that. But then he has to realize his bread and butter is building rockets, and he's making. Why doesn't the power company release all the patents for 0-point energy stuff?
Well, I mean that's
it's the same thinking. If they start building anti-gravity ships, these incredibly expensive rockets are no longer needed.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of money to be made if you own a fleet of anti-gravity ships.
Yeah, but everybody will be building them, not just
it'll be that easy.
Yes.
Is that easy to do?
Yes. Hitachi will build them. IBM will build them. Apple will build them. Every high-tech company. The technology to do this electrogravitic model is extremely easy to build. Once again, Air Force, if you want me to stop talking, just let me know.
No. The Air Force doesn't listen to Conflict Radio.
Oh, I think they probably do.
We'll see.
I think they listen to most all of them. Anyway,
they were clearly listening in on one of my season 1 episodes. You could literally hear them. You could hear them tune in. It was weird when we were talking about the locations of their underground bases. They definitely, you could definitely hear that they were in listening on that one to see if we would say it on the air. He didn't say it, but they did. Well, at least somebody did. I don't know if it was the Air Force. So let's see here. What you got next?
Well, this I already talked about. The lines of force is depicted in textbooks is the wrong direction. And I went through and corrected that problem. Basically, I talk about the history here, the speed of light. It was basically established around the 1940s. Interesting story. I guess it became official in 1983. They basically they just picked a number, and it was based primarily on that equation I gave you from Maxwell. But what was happening up until that time, everybody kept measuring the speed of light over the last 150 years or so. And this one scientist, Barry Setterfield, noticed that the speed of light was slowing over time. And people were getting upset that they couldn't reliably measure the speed of light, and they didn't have any explanation for why it was slowing, because that implied something was really, really wrong with the theory of special relativity and the constancy of the speed of light. So at one point, they decided to just declare a number and made it so.
So
And
does
then,
gravity affect the speed of light at all?
yes, it
I mean,
slows
obviously, if you get close to a black hole, the gravity's gonna,
That's right.
go
So
down.
you've hit on the reason why it's slowing down, because in reality, what's happening right now, our galaxy is moving towards something called the Great Attractor. The Great Attractor is this huge, massive object, probably a black hole, that's about 4.5 billion light years away. Our galaxy and the several hundred other galaxies in our galactic group are all moving toward that at an enormous rate of speed and accelerating. And as we move closer, the gravitational field increases, which will cause the speed of light to slow down. And why we do not detect the speed of light slowing anymore is they changed the way they measure the speed of light. In other words, when scientists set up to measure the speed of light now, they adjust the equipment to get 299,792,458. And how they do that is move, there's a distance like a meter, precisely a meter. And what they do is they change the mirror distance between the two ends so that they get that number. So in reality, what's happening is we're shrinking the distance to get that number over time. So nobody notices a change in the speed of light now because they tune it to that number. They don't use a set distance anymore and then make the measurement. They use the precise set distance, let's say a meter, and set up the experiment and measured it. And every time they did it, it was a little bit slower. Sometimes they were using the same equipment and it was slower. And so to resolve that, they just said, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're calling that the number, and your equipment better measure that number. And don't start measuring until it's set to that. And so all of a sudden, the slowing of the speed of light disappeared. No more problem.
All right. Let me ask you this: what about the problem of aging, like the Earth aging while you were at the speed of light? I mean,
Yeah.
you go somewhere and come back. Isn't it like 1,000 years later?
That phenomena, see, time doesn't really. What they're talking about, and which they don't make clear, is the flow of time. Even if you do Einstein's twin paradox thing, what has really changed is the rate at which clocks move when you're in an accelerated frame of reference relative to some other frame of reference. All clock times are determined by your rate, your motion through space, relative to an absolute stationary background ether, which they no longer accept. So the whole thing gets confusing. And that happened because Einstein, along with the people, Michelson Morley, discovered that the speed of light is constant. So this muddled up the works for the ether. And so the whole time problem becomes a bit confusing. So we do time relative from one thing, frame of reference, to another, not the absolute background. And so that's kind of a little bit confusing for everybody. The problem is where your clock, if you were to, or let's say the planet Earth, the clocks on planet Earth, if we were to slow the Earth rotation down and slow the motion of the sun as it goes around the galaxy center and slow the galaxy's acceleration, we canceled out all those motions to zero, our clock would be going faster than every other clock everywhere else on every other planet, on every other star, or any ship that's moving in outer space. The slowest, the thing that moves zero relative to the ether, that clock moves slightly faster. It's not much, but it's slightly faster. And
Right.
so traveling like, well, I'm talking 20,000 times the speed of light,
Yeah.
time becomes absolute when this happens. So that if it takes you on your clock inside of the ship, inside of the slip wave, if it takes you 10 minutes to get to a star that's 10 light years away, it's only 10 minutes. It's only 10 minutes to the people on Earth. It's only 10 minutes to you in the spaceship. This is practical. This is an application that'll work for everyone. That's the benefit of traveling within the slip wave. Time dilation doesn't happen in this case, along with contraction of length, along with the increase in mass. None of that happens when you're inside of the slip wave. It's strangely useful and perfect. It smacks of, in my opinion, intelligent design, that this is possible.
Yeah.
So that we can move to other star systems in a matter of minutes and not have the problem where everybody on Earth ages 20 years or whatever, and you come, that goes away. It's all real time. You go there, it takes you 10 minutes, comes back, takes you 10 minutes, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes on Earth, 10 minutes in the ship. Perfect. This is a practical system. This is what the aliens use. This is what we will use someday when we're allowed to build these starships.
Well, if we haven't already.
I believe we probably have. And I believe we've lost quite a few lives in the process, because you don't build a quality ship. Like I said, that any part of that ship comes out of the field at the speed of light or beyond, it's fatal. And I would bet we've lost many troopers in the early days of building these starships before it was, safe enough to attempt to travel. The whole time you're moving beyond the speed of light, you're in grave danger if anything goes wrong. It's
All right.
it's not kid stuff.
No, it definitely is not. I see Manny Lamont wants to say it functions like a subspace warp field, right?
Yeah, it's its own realm. It's the best way I can put it. I believe it's the way Bob Lazar put it, and it's a very good description.
Yeah, it really is.
You're in your own frame of reference, which everything stays normal and allows you to move within this bubble without any adverse effects of inertia, time dilation, compression of length. All those nasty things don't happen as long as you're inside the slipway. The dipole field will pull you through space, slip, as I like to call it, at incredible rates of speed without any penalties. All you need is a lot of energy.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, is there any way to use gold? Is it to create this energy?
Not unless you use some sort of a
like
fusion.
a gold powder.
Not that I know of. I can't even speculate on that. That's
all right, because there's some people that suggest that we've been put here to mine gold for for alien races as a power source. So I was just curious, like maybe that's the ticket, right? If we could figure out how to use gold dust to power these things.
Well, there's loads of people that have come up with 0-point energy type things, magnetic motors and stuff that all been suppressed as well. You could do multiple shows talking about all those poor people and what happened to them.
Yeah.
It's a criminal shame that this keeps happening to what I liken to heroes.
I see your next slides are about ether, so let's get into those.
Well, I've used the Lorentz ether model. I've extended it slightly. The model that I'm using assumes the fundamental field of ether does exist, and all particles, including the photon, acquire their motion as a result of their interaction between the particle's electrostatic structure and the quasi-elastic solid medium. The ether is stationary, with the exception that it does deform under the influence of forces acting upon it. Magnetism, that's a magnetic field, that's a rotation of space. That's something that the ether can do. Electrostatic field is a twist of space. The magnetic field happens when the electrostatic field, which is a twist of space, moves through space. When that happens, space rotates around the spinning electrical charge, and that creates the magnetic field. That's all known. That's all sensible. Nobody in physics would really argue with that. They would like to, special quantum mechanics people, but they'd be wrong. And then gravity comes about as the gravity one, Newton's gravity, Einstein's gravity comes about when charges move in that pattern I showed you earlier. An accelerated circular or trefoil knot pattern that causes mass to emerge. And mass is just nothing more than a small particle emitting a very small amount of gravitational field, a contraction of space. So all particles are consubstantial with the ether. What that means is they are made of the same thing. They are the same thing as the ether. They are just configurations of the ether. The electrostatic field is a twist of space, so it's a twist that moves within the space, and the space snaps into that shape as it moves through it. Photons are concentrations of light wave that can be equated to vibrations propagating through a stationary ether medium. The photon particle wave propagates through the solid continuous. When I say solid, I mean that which is continuous material, albeit with certain modifications that account for the properties and behavior of the photon particle wave. The theory of the slip wave explains what the mechanical modifications are and what their effect is to both space and particles. The charge structure of a particle deforms space as it moves within it. The quasi-elastic continuous medium snaps into the shape of the electrostatic field structure as the particle moves within the medium. I can't say it any plainer than that. I think it may be confusing to a lot of people because they haven't pictured it. But
why did they take ether out of the element table?
No, it's not an element. It's not matter. It's a fundamental field. In the early days of the unified field theory, it was all about explaining how gravity and electromagnetism were aspects of a fundamental field. So what I'm saying is Einstein was right. They are aspects. They are separate fields, different types, different bendings of space that create force. Force creates action at a distance. All of this is possible because of the bendings of the ether, either twisting it, rotating it, stretching it, or contracting it. This is simple mechanics. That's all it ever was. That's all it ever should have been. All this quantum mechanics, particles interacting with other particles, is a rabbit hole. We need to move back into simple classical field theory and wave theory. That explains everything. And I have, in fact, used those equations to explain everything. It's just a matter of everybody else catching up now and realizing this stuff is right. And we need to start applying it to building warp drives and other things of great use. So that's Lorentz ether theory, reinstating the model. Well, what went wrong, really? was the interpretation of the Michelson and Morley experiment was deeply flawed. The validity of the results were compromised by an incorrect assumption. That assumption was that the speed of light would be affected by external moving frames of reference. What do I mean there? I mean, like a baseball, when thrown, it gets its velocity from the throwing arm. It's external. So its speed can be affected by other things moving relative to it. But if you have an internal speed that's not have anything to do with any external forces, as the photon does, it can move relative to everything else at one single speed, which is exactly what we see in nature. This incorrect assumption affected the interpretation of the data and the conclusions drawn from the experiment. Misinterpretation of the data. The incorrect assumption led to the misinterpretation of the experimental results and the underlying physical process of the photon motion. Basically, it so surprised them that the speed of light was constant that they couldn't explain that they came up with an erroneous conclusion that the ether does not exist because the ether wind was not detected. Well, it shouldn't have been. The photons aren't affected by the interferometer's movement through space. Interferometer being the thing that's measuring light in 90-degree angles and trying to detect a difference. It didn't detect any difference because light always moves that speed. It doesn't matter which direction the interferometers, which direction the planet's moving. It doesn't matter. It's always going to get the same because the speed of light is being determined internally, independently of any other moving frame of reference. That's where the trick was. They didn't get that. Really,
yeah, it seems like the speed of light changes depending on where you are in the galaxy.
Well, it only changes when it's passing through a gravitational field. So I propose this. There is a need for renewed research and experimentation for the detection of the ether. I propose this. The experiment should be repeated by using the motion of particles such as neutrons circling in an accelerator. We have those. We have those accelerators. Yeah. These particles are caused to move by an external force. So we're literally pushing the neutron or the proton around this circle. And therefore, they are affected by the relative motion through the ether. And I believe that there will be detectable differences in the beam timing in the east and west tunnels going through east and west going tunnels during the months of late December and early January. And I can kick myself for not copying the article coming from somebody at CERN who was complaining that in December and January, the beam timing was off. I should have kept that article. I can't find it again. And their assumption was, well, it was groundwater problem, I think.
Yeah, they scrubbed that stuff.
Yeah. Also, another way to detect the ether wind is by changes in the rate of radioactive decay. The rate of again, and this is all over the internet, the rate of radioactive decay will also change in late December, early January. And when you look up radioactive decay changing, it's always in December, January timeframe, just as I predicted. And whether the decay speeds up or slows down depends on what direction the Earth is moving in, what direction the solar system is moving in, whether the Earth's spin, rotation, and everything is adding to that overall motion or subtracting from. If it's subtracting from, then the decay rates will increase slightly. If it's adding to, then the decay rates will slow down. And that all has to be figured out. But the fact of the matter is, in fact, the decay rates are changing in December and January. And that's the time when the Earth is closest to the sun and moving the fastest. The rate of change of the Earth is affecting the decays of all the particles. Matches my theory.
All All right,
Good luck.
huh?
Go ahead.
Let's get into some of these questions.
Good. Yeah.
Dr. Strangelove wants to know. I guess this was about something you were talking about earlier. The voltage is the scar on Mars.
The
Is that-
voltage is the scar on Mars.
Yeah, I guess you were talking about the. I'll just move on.
I don't know what that
Do we really
means.
know our front? Okay, so Nicole wants to know: do we really know how far the Germans got on anti-gravity?
I think probably the U.S. does. I don't know, other than what has been talked about, and I haven't really studied that much. But there were so many people working on anti-gravity back in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. I believe the government, the secret government, whatever, knows quite a bit about what happened there.
Yeah,
So
I bet they got farther than we did.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that got pretty far or were very close before their stuff was scrapped and melted down.
All right, Not Quite Human wants to know: do you think they all have different craft? Meaning, I guess, different governments.
Well, that's a good question, whether other governments besides us have crafts. And the only thing that I can think of that may suggest that there is another government, and that government is China, was that we encountered a UFO in Vietnam, and it was fired at. We fired missiles at it. We fired from gunboats, and all the bullets and rockets just came reflected right back at our people and shot and killed some and damaged the boat. I think a missile returned and hit the boat, which seems to suggest that UFO was taking sides.
Yeah, or that UFO is actually an alien UFO. I don't think we'd have that kind of tech.
I don't know. I'm just speculating at this point.
Yeah.
And this is the only evidence that I have that suggests that maybe somebody else has this technology.
Yeah, I would imagine that the craft are all different, even if they're like different alien races. I mean, they're all not going to have the same shape of craft. Like you said, some will be triangle, some will be, saucer shaped, some will be, cigar shaped. That's just reality, right?
Yeah. You have to realize that these peoples are millions of years ahead of us, and maybe several million, several hundred million more evolved one race than another. That makes the whole thing quite difficult to comprehend and get a gauge on what's really going on, because you got some starships that are literally dimension traveling. They're opening portals. They have Stargate technology, and they just open up a technology. Usually you see it like when that happens, it's usually done with high magnetics and some more advanced systems may use the Stargate technology that uses metamaterials, and they just tear holes in space and they jump from one region to another instantaneously. That's the most advanced way of travel, but that's people that are millions upon millions of years more evolved than us, and they're not working against each other. They freely worked on these technologies, and the whole race has benefited, and they actually will evolve faster and more rapidly the more knowledge you get.
And look how far we got just since the 50s with our televisions.
That's right. Yeah. There's tremendous technological boom in the last 100 years or so. It's just remarkable. Imagine how much more we would advance if we had technology that could take us to the stars and meet other races and start exchanging knowledge and technology. It would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm not gonna keep you over time, so I think we're done with the slides. How many did you have left?
let's see, the ether model, dynamic, that technical stuff, more technical. Primary tests of permanent magnets. This is just me going over north-south pole, discover linear gravity, important points. Slip wave. These are the equations. Some of these are very famous and very recognizable. Everything but this one. This is the one I came up with. Is the final step of the mathematical model, which I wrote a program that'll show how the equations work, and then experimental videos. So that's it.
All right.
That's the.
All right.
That's
So
the show.
let's just, I guess we'll finish up these questions and we'll call it a show. We'll have to get you back on. Maybe we can finish up that presentation
Well, there's
here.
more there's definitely more that needs to be done there and added and proofread and so forth.
All right. Okay. So let's see. Manny wants to know, are super black holes common to every galaxy?
Yes. There's one at the center of every galaxy. And there's 3 chapters in my book that I talk about cosmology, the real Big Bang, what happened, and it all has to do with the neutron. Yes, that's how the galaxy is formed. You need a gravitational source to pull all the other pieces together, mainly neutron stars, which form regular stars by gathering up the hydrogen and forming the star. That's all explained. It's a lot. It could go into another half an hour or more. Basically, there's 3 chapters that I discuss why there's black holes, what's going to happen with these black holes that eventually turn into Titan-sized black holes and gather all the energy and matter back together and reform the cosmic egg.
Oh, that's fascinating. So eventually it's all over.
We're already in the late stage. We're already collapsing, which I know is opposite of what everybody else is saying about the other galaxies are accelerating away from us. Well, if you would look beyond where they're accelerating, you would see they're actually being pulled toward large Titan-sized black holes. And astronomers, a lot of them out there have complained about this and are saying this. There's huge walls of galaxies being pulled into these gigantic Titan-sized, just like I predicted. And the evidence is out there. But they want to stick to the mainstream theory that, well, the universe is expanding and the acceleration is because space is magically being pulled apart by dark energy. That's all garbage. And it's never going to be good stuff. And it's the rhetoric and the dogma that is put on by modern day physics is keeping us in the dark where that is concerned as well.
Yeah.
We're not expanding. We're contracting.
So
we're in the contraction phase.
That answers your question, Marcus, if black holes are even real.
Yes, they are, of course, very real. They are in fact, what they are is very large, dense neutron stars. There's a certain size that when you get to that size, a neutron star compresses with its gravity so much, it goes dark. And so what a black hole is, it's not really a hole at all. It's an incredibly dense piece of matter, spherically shaped, that is so dense and the gravity so strong, light doesn't reflect off of it. It's just pure black. And you don't want to mess with those things, believe me.
So I guess going into a black hole, you're just done, right?
Unless you use the slip wave technology.
Wait, you go into it?
You could go beneath the event horizon. Now, the tricky part, it would be totally black. It'd be like a nightmare. Even if you're safe in your starship, you're using it to buffer away from the huge gravitational field. I wouldn't go personally, but I would send a probe first. And if it could go below and then come back out again, then that's great. The technology works. But if you were to touch the surface of that black hole, which is a neutron star, with an intense either magnetic field or slipwave field, there would be an explosion of immense proportion, which would destroy your ship immediately, because the anti-gravity or the very slight gravity field touching an immensely massive gravitational field, releasing those particles from being compressed, would mean that they would eject away from into your slipwave field and wipe you and your ship out. So you can't touch the black hole, the neutron mass of that. And I believe that this is again in the book, that if you go on the North Pole and the South Pole, the spinning black hole, which is really a neutron star, you could drop a device down concentric rings using an intense magnetic field and bleed off neutrons from the two poles, basically returning that neutron star to pure neutrons, just plasma neutrons in outer space, which is great, because what happens when a neutron particle is isolated by itself in outer space, within 15 minutes, it turns into a proton and an electron. And what's that? Hydrogen. Now you could build stars using that material. All you got to do is send that hydrogen in an orbit around another neutron star. It will compress, it will heat up, and pretty soon you'll have another star. That's how stars are built. All of that is in the book. All of that is described in detail, and all of it makes sense.
All right. Stuff says, talking about the gold, I guess that was for repairing their ozone and atmosphere on their home planet or something. So maybe I was wrong about. Though I think Scott Walter does think that the Ark was some kind of power plant that was using gold dust. So I don't know. Maybe we're both right. All right. Let's see here. Nicola wants to know, so at the speed of light, how long will it take to reach our nearest star?
At the speed of light, I believe that is Proxima Centauri. That's approximately 4.2 light years. So at the speed of light, it would take 4.2 years to get there one way, and then 4.2 to get back.
So it'd be 8.4 years in Earth time, because you're safe in your bubble.
Well, just going the speed of light, it would be 8.4 years for the people on the ship. It's too slow. That's my point. The speed of light is too slow. It would be actual time. So if you're going to only travel at the speed of light, your time bonus doesn't really work out for you in that mode, because it's going to take you sitting in your ship waiting 4.2 years at the speed of light to get there. Your clock is going to run for 4.2 years.
Yeah.
So it's no good. You got to go thousands of times faster to get there, so you can get there in only a few minutes, which is.
But what I'm saying is that it would be, by the time you got there and back to Earth, 8.4 years would have passed on Earth, because you're still safe inside your little bubble. I mean, you definitely want to go faster than that.
Yes.
All right. Davy Jones wants to know, what do you think of Terrence Howard's information that he dropped on Joe Rogan? Did you watch that?
No, I don't know about that. So
yeah, I didn't watch it either. I tried getting into it, and it just wasn't for me. It wasn't my thing either. Manny wants to know, what safety measures can be taken to avoid dangerous disruptions to this field that would harm those traveling within the field?
Redundant circuits that are all the time checking the current flow, the voltages, all kinds of redundancy. You would have to have backup circuits, and these would have to kick on before the other circuits completely failed, so that there's no loss of the. And it would also, I would have, if there's a failure about to happen or getting close, the ship has to go to an emergency slowdown, which can happen with this slip wave technology, in the snap of a finger, you can go from 20,000 times the speed of light relative to the absolute stationary background of space to zero. That once you do that, then the field can drop. There's no harm. But you can't actually be going faster than the speed of light and have it collapse. So you need a lot of intelligent design, a lot of artificial intelligence going, constantly checking to make sure that there's not going to be a failure. You just can't, build it like you would build a jet engine and hope it's going to work all right most of the time, because if it fails, if a jet engine fails, you might still make it on the other engines and land safely. But if the warp drive fails, and this is fatal, instantaneously fatal. So yeah, there's got to be a lot of circuitry and computer stuff going on, constantly checking. If anything is about to go wrong, it has to shut down the velocity before the field collapses. So that's basically,
or I guess if you were in a Starship Enterprise, you could just raise your shields before you went to warp speed, right?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't even know how the shields would work. I guess they would be magnetic shields. I don't know.
Nicola wants to know, do you think the Tic Tac, that was, I guess, those Tic Tac videos, I'm sure you've seen it. You think it was of this Earth or advanced technology?
That's a good question. I think there's a good chance that it was our boys testing out their technology versus our technology to see if the new radar could detect them. But it could be aliens because they were going down underwater near, what's that island? Catalina? Somewhere in that area where there's an underground base. We already know or most people know that there's an underground alien base there. So that leaves it open as to whether they're ours or theirs. Logically, to me, I think they were, in some of these cases, it's our stuff. And they're just seeing how our pilots react to this superior technology and, what can be done and how our reactions are. So I think in some cases it's our stuff. And in a lot of cases, it's just the aliens doing their thing and seeing how our technology reacts. Who knows? It's pure speculation until somebody admits to it. We don't know.
Yeah, so he says, so basically, like any ship system, there's plenty of redundancy measures on modern military equipment also. Thanks for answering my question. All right, so can advanced species create galaxies, universes, you think?
Well, I talk about it in those last 3 chapters. I invented a thing called the stellar converter. And what it is, it's using that anti-gravity technology with concentric rings that hit the North and the South Pole, bleed off the neutrons, push those neutrons to another. This takes like multiple Earth systems or planetary systems, because the resources involved are immense to do this. And then you funnel the neutron plasma to another naked neutron star, spinning one, which there are millions of them out there that we don't see because they don't really emit light unless there's some gases around them and they're circling fast enough and they're ionized and they emit radio waves. You could build stars. You could bleed off. See, I invented this idea because I thought, well, we're heading toward the big black hole, the great attractor. What if we were to send one of these bleeders? But this thing is so huge, it's light years across. It would take hundreds of millions of years to bleed it down to the point where we wouldn't get sucked into it. And I don't think that, in truth, is the right thing to do. It's messing with the natural order of things in a natural way, that this galaxy is cyclic. It's supposed to collapse.
Oh, that's what we're best at, though. We're best at messing with the natural course of things.
I mean, you could do it on a small scale to make a star. But whole galaxies, we could never generate, the Earth people could never generate the resources and mechanisms to build millions of stars. Maybe one. It would take an incredible effort just to make one. So I would say no. I don't think we or any galactic group will ever get to that. It's just a matter of exploration and increasing their knowledge and experience.
Yeah, Nicola with the good questions. He wants to know, would bending space-time be a faster way?
Well, you are in fact bending space-time, but not like the Alcubierre method, which would be fatal and not practical, where you compress space with a huge gravitational field in the front end and it stretch space with the other one. That method is never going to work. The math is wrong, and I think he probably knows it. But the method I described is actually bending space in a particular way that enables things to move within the slip wave. There's other systems and other peoples that will use the more advanced method. Is not really with compressing space like the physicists talk about and making shortcuts through it and so forth. It's really going interdimensional.
Yeah.
So that what you do is you create a portal opening. You enter here into another realm, which could be millions or billions of light years away. It depends on how the thing is constructed. It's beyond my knowledge, beyond how I could imagine that being done, but it can be done with the right forces involved and pulling space apart, causing it to vibrate at ultra high frequencies. That's a good alternate method of travel. And some of the people that use that method, you'll see a green mist appear as it's opening up, or a rainbow effect. That's because the magnetic fields or whatever are causing a distortion and the light is refracting in those areas. But that's another method. And I think a more advanced method than the one I'm describing to you now. Mine is a basic, simple entry-level mode of operation, which primitive species like us, it's the first one we use. Later on, we'll use these other interdimensional stargates and whatever.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. All right, Mark, we're gonna wrap it up. Let me ask you a quick question. You were just talking about interdimensional stuff, and do you think that the black holes and universe and everything that we see in the night sky is the same in every dimension, or could it be that black holes aren't affecting our galaxy or our universe at all in other dimensions?
Well, then we're getting into intelligent design, which my theory is and which I believe in. It's been said by many people, NDEers and so forth, that God has created an infinite amount of universes and dimensions and time dimensions, time segments and so forth, all running in parallel at the same time. And so the rules of physics may be entirely different in other dimensions. I strongly suspect that. And there will be plenty of universes where the laws of physics are basically the same as here. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more that it'll be different. This goes beyond the scope of the theory of super relativity and what I could connect to and get information from in this current form I'm in here right now, this avatar. That kind of question can be answered when you reach the other side and you gain access to the universal mind and all other consciousnesses and become part of the whole. You'll be able to see the bigger picture, and what you're asking about is the bigger picture.
I've always believed that once we move on, all of our questions will be answered.
Yes, all of that high tech stuff. It's just, and it's answered not with words and like I'm doing. It's pure knowledge infusion.
Yeah, you'll
Instantly.
just know. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
I'm at www.super-relativity.com. Super-relativity.com. Links to my book are there. Links to my YouTube page. Links to my papers are all buttons on the front page you can go to. And and I have a blog where I write articles every once in a while and upload them that you can detailed discussions about some of the things we talked about today. It's all there. That's my headquarters.
All right, and the links are all down in the description box below, guys. Thanks for coming in, Mark. We ask all of our guests the same question every show. I might have asked you this last time you were here. Do you know who Corn Pop is?
I probably didn't know it last time either. No, I don't know who Corn Pop is.
He's a bad dude.
Okay.
It's a thing we do with our listeners. Thanks a lot for coming on. I hope you had a really good time.
Yeah, I did.
Fascinating discussion, everyone. Mark, hang on for just a minute. Remember, guys, we're on Twitter. Follow us, or X, I guess it is now, whatever it is. We're over there. Just look for Conflict Radio. Follow us over there. I always release the shows we do, the times, and that way you can be a part of our live discussion. I know that there's a lot going on today. Everybody's glued probably to their TV for some reason, as if we didn't know this was coming. It's a crazy world out there, everybody. Just buy a 50-pound bag of rice, throw it in your closet. It's probably going to come in handy at some point in your lifetime. Batten down the hatches and be safe, everyone.